You know, with an extra day of prep, some coaches are going to add a wrinkle. How about this? Amon-Ra St. Brown to Jared Goff. The reverse pass executed to perfection. St. Brown drops it in the bucket for his first completion and first touchdown pass of his career. More likely to be on the receiving end, and he would do that too. Goff to St. Brown. Jared Goff had a game. They might even call it the Jared Goff game. 18 of 18, 292, and 2 touchdowns. Caught one, too. That is the most passing attempts without an incompletion in a game in NFL history. Bryant McFadden, our guy, Ryan Wilson, in with reaction. Gentlemen, it doesn't get a whole lot better than that. I think Jared Goff's going to be lining up those black uniforms for the rest of the season. Says, we're wearing these till I throw an incompletion. 18 of 18. Efficient. Not asked to throw the ball 60 times in this game. Almost touches 300 yards. Throws 2, catches 1. I mean, you're feeling what about Jared Goff right now?
You're feeling great because he came into this game with 4 interceptions, and he wasn't quite as consistent as the Jared Goff we'd seen in recent years in Detroit. And I think you feel fantastic about the idea, if you're offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, knowing that Jared Goff's going to get through this without making the silly mistakes that's plagued him earlier in the year. You talk about 18 of 18. They finished 19 of 19 because of that
very good
St. Brown touchdown that we saw. Also, B-Mac, did you love the Jared Goff late hands as he caught that ball, the teardrop there? For some perspective, 18 of 18, that's 20 fewer completions than Geno had on the other side. But to your point, they were clinical. They executed perfectly. And if you watch these 2 games tonight on Monday Night Football, they look like completely different sports. Yeah. I'm glad this was the finale, the final show, because they put on a show. And it was incredibly fun to watch on both sides in terms of the offense we saw.
Yeah, this was a get-right game for Jared Goff. To your point, he struggled a little bit this season compared to what we saw from him in 2023. And then the last time we saw him there in Detroit, he struggled against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this was an opportunity to really get back in his comfort zone. No one saw 18 for 18. No one saw that. No one saw a receiving touchdown as well. But he just saved his best for the final game of this week in the NFL schedule. And let's see, can he sustain this level of play? Clearly not perfection when it comes to his completion percentage, but just being smart with the football, no turnovers, right? And just being comfortable and taking shots down the football field. And finally, guys, he got Sam Laporta going. You know, you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown and Williamson. Sam Laporta was the guy who's been missing the entire season. So it was good to see him involved in the passing game, because when he's catching passes from Jared Goff, their offense is much better.
And then that 2-headed monster in the backfield doing what they need to do in the run game. It's a complete attack, especially when you get this sort of performance out of the quarterback. Again, 18 for 18 can't be said enough, and a tip of the cap here to Jared Goff. If not for that perfection, my first question would have been, where the heck was the Seattle defense we were told about? I know their opponents in the first 3 weeks were not all that Detroit is going to be on a week-to-week basis, but we called this was the ID check. This was the measure-up game, and they come up short in this game on the road, Ryan. Where did they fall short, specifically on the defensive side of the ball?
I know Mike McDonald, the first-year head coach and the defensive mastermind, talked about it going into the week, that they could find ways to overcome the loss to Boye Mafe, the edge rusher, and first-round pick Byron Murphy, the defensive lineman out of Texas. They weren't able to overcome it. And, you know, we talk about smash-mouth football. We saw that from the Detroit Lions in terms of the efficiency with which they played running the football. 18 of 18 is your Jared Goff line. That means that the running backs did a lot of the heavy lifting. We saw touchdowns from both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and David Montgomery was a battering ram early in that game to set the tone, and there were no answers defensively for Seattle, and that meant that you had to lean on Geno Smith, who was good up until the end through the interception that ended the game for them, but they're not going to be able to win that way. They have to get healthy in order to be competitive, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Mac, the word in my head that I was thinking about throughout this season and coming into this game about Seattle, specifically defensively, is momentum. They've been playing with so much momentum throughout this season on that side of the ball. What does momentum mean to a defensive unit when it's working against them the way it was tonight?
Someone has to make a play. And to your point, Ryan, about some of the key contributors, you forgot about Leonard Williams as well. You know, they're one of their top defensive linemen. So you came into this ball game shorthanded, missing around three starters. And you talked about the momentum. When you're kind of in that snowball that's coming downhill and it's getting bigger and bigger, someone has to find a way to make a play. And I can tell you what I saw that jump-started the momentum booster for Detroit early on in the ball game when DK Metcalf fumbled the football. because you remember at that time their offense was generating points. Of course, Detroit had just scored, but their offense was marching on the football field. Fumble happens, they picks it up, return it, got some positive yards, and then instantly the scoreboard started to open for the Detroit Lions. So when you're going into a ball game, you're playing against a good team, good on the road, and you're shorthanded, you have to have mistakes at the bare minimum. And that's what we saw today. And they just ran into Jared Goff when he was in his bag and he was preparing his best effort. And they just couldn't get out of their own way when you talk about some of the minor mistakes that surfaced throughout this ball game.
When we look at the offensive approach for the Seattle team, too, it sort of begs the question. I know that Geno's always going to be a volume passer, but you do have productive run. It's not passing this much because they're void of a run game. Kenneth Walker is not spectacular, but effective in this game, B-Mac. Should Geno Smith be putting the ball in the air almost 60 times a night?
No. Well, they were playing catch-up the majority of this ball game, right? So it made sense for them to try to throw, and they started utilizing tempo to try to catch up. Not to mention, it felt like their defense really couldn't get any stops, so they tried to score at will. But I can tell you this much. Yeah, this was a high-scoring affair. Seattle came up on the losing end of the stick, but they're going to be okay. Because with Kenneth Walker in this lineup, they have balance. And yes, he didn't get the opportunities that you would like to see him get. He still was super impactful. 3 touchdowns, right? 3 touchdowns against a pretty defensive unit. You still have Zach Charbonnet as well. You look at the wide receivers, they just couldn't get any stops from their defense. And I'll say this, I wouldn't be surprised to see these two teams face off again in January football. And you know, when it comes to January football, that's when the tournament starts. That's when the playoff starts. So this might not be the final time that these two teams play each other.
Thank you, B-Mac, because before we came on, Joe had the nerve to ask me if this Seattle team finishes over 500. I think they're getting the playoffs over I think they're getting the playoffs over 500. One thing I point out before you rebut.
A lot of football. A lot of football. Look at the quality of the wins. Look at what the defense did tonight. It wasn't asked from a point of critical thinking or being critical of this team. It was asked from the point of view of, do you think this is a 10-win team?
I think B-Mac has a question.
Please.
Yes, 10-win team. Yes, they will get into the playoffs. The only thing I think could hurt their chances, Ryan and Joe, is significant injuries to key players. But if this team can get healthy, remember, they came into this ball game missing 3 significant starters. Top linebacker, your top 2 D linemen.
Yeah,
that hurts.
Football.
It is. It is. And there are not a lot of teams in the National Football League that can go on the road against a really, really good team and be super relevant for 4 quarters without 3 key starters on one side of the football field, especially the defensive side. So I'm right there with Ryan. I see this team, if they stay healthy, that offense has been humming the entire season. They just couldn't get the stops. If they're healthy, they can get the stops that's needed to be able to be in a ball game like tonight. I think they should be fine.
With the Niners, a trip to the Jets, Bears on the road, Vikings, Packers.
Well, 2 weeks we'll find out about the 49ers because I got the impression you seem to think the 49ers have a chance to pull this thing out in the NFC West. Correct?
I certainly do. I think
we'll find out in 2 weeks.
Until further notice, that is still the team to beat.
Injury concerns as well.
Jordan Mason facing. We got plenty of football coming your way over these next few weeks, and we got to talk about it. We need a game changer.
This is easy.
This is the easiest one. I'm gonna throw the alley. You freak the oop. I mean, Jared Goff, spectacular.
I can't dunk it, B-Mac, but I'll double pump the layup on the alley, so thank you for that. And Jared Goff, it's easy. I wish I knew Jared Goff's full name like Geno Smith, but this was Jared Goff's night, 18 of 18, and that's great, and those are record-setting performances, but the play of the night, B-Mac, for me, was the fact that he caught that touchdown pass like he'd been running routes his entire life. This was a clinical performance from Jared Goff, got the ball where it needed to be. Their first 9 drives, they scored 6 touchdowns, and you can talk about the injuries on the other side. They went out there and executed this Lions offense did, and it was something we hadn't seen consistently from Jared Goff over the first 3 weeks of the season. You have to feel great about where they are now in that division. The Packers have been banged up a little bit. Caleb Williams has grown into his role, certainly in Chicago, and you got to keep an eye out for those Minnesota Vikings who are still undefeated. But if Jared Goff plays like this, and that offense starts to hum, and that defense can get back on track, they're going to be right back there in the mix as well.
You know what? With Jared Goff being the OL Paso Taco game changer, the only thing that was missing was a little bit of salsa. Not on the taco, but the dance in the end zone when he made that touchdown reception. Unbelievable ball game, guys. He was flawless. I'm just so mad and disappointed with myself because I dropped Jared Goff from my fantasy lineup because he was struggling the previous matchups, and I added Geno, and I had to watch Jared Goff give quality fantasy points while in the waiver wire. But Jared Goff, who cares about fantasy? It's all about you. You're my game changer. Next time, not only put salsa on your taco, but add a little salsa when you catch another touchdown pass.
A little move. We'll see if they bust that one out once again. That is Jared Thomas Goff.
Thank you.
To you. Appreciate you, fellas.
I didn't know that, Joe. Thomas? Okay.
Shout out to Google. Most consecutive completions to start a game.
There it is.
Now, those 3 beyond Goff did find an incompletion later in those games. So Goff, again, most pass attempts without an incompletion in a game in NFL history. 18 of 18, 292, 2 touchdowns, caught one as well. 18 straight to start a game, the 4th longest streak from opening kick to first incompletion, and he didn't even find one.